In this video, we'll talk about how to use half-angle formulas in trigonometry. So I've written out each of the half-angle formulas over here. We have the sine of theta over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine of theta divided by 2. The next one is the cosine of theta over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of theta divided by 2. And then for the tangent of theta over 2, there's actually two equivalent half-angle formulas. The first is 1 minus cosine of theta divided by sine theta, and the other is sine theta divided by 1 plus cosine of theta. So let's work through a few examples of how to use these formulas in practice. Let's say that we would like to find the sine of 22.5 degrees. So if we think about it, the sine of 22.5 degrees, we can use this first formula right here where we use some angle theta divided by 2. So if we set 22.5, let's write this right here. If we set 22.5 degrees equal to theta over 2, and we solve for theta, we just multiply both sides by 2. Theta, we can see, would be 45 degrees. So we can use 45 degrees in this first half angle formula and see what we get. So let's write that out. Let's say sine of 45 degrees divided by 2 is equal to, now when we say plus or minus, the quadrant that our angle lies in really determines whether it's going to be a positive or a negative. So sine of 22.5 degrees, that falls in the first quadrant, and sine is positive in the first quadrant. So this whole equation will be positive. So we'll write 1 minus the cosine of theta. Remember, theta we're using 45 degrees divided by 2. So we get, what is the cosine of 45 degrees? Well, if you think about your unit circle and you think about the xy coordinates that correspond to 45 degrees, the x coordinate is the one that corresponds to cosine, and that's square root of 2 over 2. So we can fill that in here. Square root of 2 over 2. And then we have that whole thing divided by 2. So to make things a little easier, we can multiply the numerator by 2 and multiply the denominator by 2 just to get rid of this 2 as a fraction. So when we do that, 2 times 1 is 2. When we do 2 times the square root of 2 over 2, we'll get square root of 2. So let's write that. We're left with 2 minus the square root of 2. And then down here in the denominator, 2 times 2 is just 4. So to simplify, the square root of 4 is just 2. So what we can write as our final answer is, let's write it over here. The square root of 2 minus root 2 all over 2. And that will be our final answer. So the sine of 22.5 degrees is the square root of 2 minus root 2 over 2. All right, let's try another one. Let's say we would like to find the cosine of 105 degrees. So we can use this cosine half angle formula to figure this out. So we can rewrite this as the cosine of some angle over 2. Well, if we set the angle over 2 equal to 105, we can multiply both sides by 2 to solve for theta. 105 times 2 is 210. So we're going to say theta will be equal to 210 degrees. That's what we'll use in our half angle formula. So let's write that out. We've got the cosine of 210 divided by 2 is equal to, and remember, to determine if we will use a plus sign or a minus sign, we just have to think, what is cosine in that particular quadrant? So we're working with an angle of 105 degrees. So that falls in the second quadrant, and cosine is negative in the second quadrant. So this whole expression will be negative. So we'll say 1 plus the cosine of theta. Theta we said we're going to use is 210 divided by 2. So to figure out the cosine of 210 degrees, it helps if we kind of think of our unit circle. And if we draw an angle of 210 degrees, we'll land somewhere over here, 210. And remember, the trick that we can use is, let's find the reference angle, or the distance between 210 and the x-axis. So if this point right here is 180, this reference angle right here would just be 30 degrees. It's the difference between 210 and 180. So we know the cosine of 30 degrees, that's square root of 3 over 2. But for 210 degrees, cosine is negative in this third quadrant over here. So we'll use negative square root of 3 over 2. So let's fill that in. We have 1 minus the square root of 3 over 2, all over 2. So once again, just like in the last example, we can multiply the numerator by 2 and the denominator by 2, just to get rid of this pesky 2 in the denominator right here. So we get negative square root of 2 times 1, that's 2. 2 times square root of 3 over 2, these 2's will cancel out and we'll be left with square root of 3. And down here we have 2 times 2, that's just 4. So we can write our final answer as, let's move over here, the negative square root of 2 minus root 3 over, down here in the denominator, the square root of 4 is just 2. So we can write a 2. And that will be our final answer. So the cosine of 105 degrees is negative square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 2. All right, let's try one more example. Let's say we want to find the tangent of 15 degrees. So we can use our half angle formula. We can plug in tangent of theta over 2. So if we have theta over 2 is equal to 15, what is theta? Well, we can multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that 2, and theta will be 15 times 2 is 30. So 30 degrees is what we can use for our half angle formula. And remember, we have two different formulas that we can choose for tangent. They're both equal, so just choose whichever one you would like. We'll use the first one for this example. So we'll say the tangent of 30 degrees divided by 2 is equal to 1 minus the cosine of 30 degrees over the sine of 30 degrees. So we know that the cosine of 30 degrees is square root 3 over 2, so we can fill that in. And we know that the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. So once again, we can multiply the numerator by 2 and the denominator by 2 to get rid of these 2's. So in the numerator we get 2 times 1, that's 2, we'll write it over here. 2 times the square root of 3 divided by 2, these 2's will cancel out and we'll just be left with minus root 3. And down here in the denominator, 1/2 times 2 is just 1. So we have 2 minus square root of 3 over 1, or we can just leave it as 2 minus the square root of 3. So the tangent of 15 degrees is equal to 2 minus the square root of 3.